Where do your thoughts really come from? In a few seconds, a thought will appear in your mind. You do not know what it will be. You did not book it. You did not approve it. You did not receive a polite email saying, your next thought will arrive shortly. And yet, it will arrive. It may be useful. It may be nonsense. It may be a memory from 2011 that is chosen, for no clear reason, to ruin your evening. That is the strange thing about thoughts. They feel like yours, but they do not always behave like yours. So where do they really come from? Scientists have spent decades studying this problem. Philosophers have argued about it for thousands of years. Religions have built entire traditions around it. And after all that effort, the answer is still not as tidy as anyone would like, which is frankly inconsiderate of the universe. Before we go any further, try a tiny experiment. For the next 10 seconds, do not think about a white bear. That is all. Just keep the bear out. Ready? Go. How did that go? Probably not well. For most people, the bear appears almost immediately, as if it has been waiting behind a curtain with a packed lunch. And once it arrives, it becomes weirdly difficult to evict. This is annoying because you were given one job, one very simple job, and your brain responded by placing a bear directly in the middle of the room. In 1987, psychologist Daniel Wegner studied this exact problem. He asked people to sit in a room and speak their thoughts out loud for 5 minutes. The instruction was simple. Try not to think about a white bear. If the bear appeared, they had to ring a bell. It sounds like the sort of experiment someone invents after a long lunch, but it became one of the most famous studies in psychology because the bells kept ringing. People repeatedly thought about the very thing they were trying to avoid. The brain, given billions of possible subjects, kept returning to the forbidden bear like a dog returning to a suspicious sandwich. Then Wegner made it more interesting. After people had spent time suppressing the thought, he told them they were now allowed to think about the bear, and they thought about it even more. The thought had bounced back. It had not vanished. It had simply been waiting in the hallway doing stretches. This became known as the rebound effect. Try to crush a thought, and sometimes it comes back stronger, which is bad news for anyone who has ever tried to stop thinking about an awkward conversation, an unpaid bill, a strange pain in the left knee, or the time they said, you too, when the waiter told them to enjoy their meal. Human memory has a cruel filing system. It misplaces passwords. It forgets why you walked into the kitchen. But one embarrassing sentence from 12 years ago? Perfect condition. Fully restored. Available in high definition. Wegner later explained this with ironic process theory. The idea is simple. To stop thinking about something, part of your mind has to keep checking whether you are thinking about it. And that is the trap. The checking system keeps the thought alive. It is like hiring someone to make sure there are no biscuits in the house, then asking them to walk past your desk every 30 seconds with a biscuit report. The system means well. It is just not what engineers would call elegant. One part of the mind tries to distract you. Another part monitors whether the unwanted thought has returned. When you are tired, stressed, or distracted, the distracting part weakens. The monitoring part keeps going. So the thought sneaks back in wearing a small badge that says, official business. This is why just stop thinking about it is such useless advice. It sounds strong. It sounds practical. It has the emotional intelligence of a spoon. The brain does not work like a light switch. It works more like a group chat you cannot leave. Something pings. Something replies. Someone brings up the bear again. Nobody knows who invited Greg, and now everyone is arguing. The white bear experiment tells us something uncomfortable. Thoughts can appear without permission, but that is only the beginning, because some thoughts are not just unwanted. Some are strange. A sudden worry, a dark image, a ridiculous idea, a memory you did not ask for, a sentence in your head so bizarre you briefly wonder whether your brain has been eating glue. People often panic when this happens. They think, why did I think that? Or worse, what does that say about me? But intrusive thoughts are not rare. They are extremely common. In 2014, researchers studied unwanted intrusive thoughts across 13 countries and 6 continents. They interviewed 777 people. About 94% reported having at least one intrusive thought in the previous 3 months. 94%. That is not a tiny psychological oddity. That is nearly everyone. Human beings disagree about politics, religion, football teams, traffic rules, and whether pineapple belongs on pizza. But apparently we are united by the fact that our brains occasionally throw strange rubbish onto the stage and refuse to explain themselves. That is oddly comforting. Not because intrusive thoughts are pleasant. They often are not. But because having them does not make you unusual. It makes you standard issue. The important point is this. A thought appearing in your mind does not automatically mean it represents you. A thought is not a confession. It is not a prophecy. It is not always a deep message from the soul. Sometimes it is just mental static, a badly timed pop-up, a spark from a nervous system that has been running since before breakfast and has not received proper management. Judging yourself by every thought is like judging an entire city by one strange flyer stuck to a lamppost. It may be there, it may be odd, but it is not the city. And your mind is a large city. There are libraries, factories, old buildings, traffic jams, suspicious alleys, and at least one person playing the accordion badly. Not everything that happens there deserves a press conference. So thoughts can appear without permission. They can be unwanted. They can be weird. And then, as if that were not enough, your brain sometimes invents explanations after the fact. This is where neuroscience becomes wonderfully unsettling. Michael Gazzaniga studied rare patients whose two brain hemispheres had been surgically separated to treat severe epilepsy. These split brain cases are unusual, so we should be careful. They do not mean every brain works exactly like this, but they gave scientists a remarkable glimpse into how the mind builds stories. In one famous experiment, a patient's left hemisphere saw a chicken claw. The right hemisphere saw a snowy scene. The patient was then asked to choose matching pictures. One hand pointed to a chicken. That made sense. The other hand pointed to a shovel. That also made sense, because of the snow. But then the patient was asked why he chose the shovel. Here was the problem. The speaking part of the brain had not seen the snow. It did not know the real reason. A cautious brain might have said, "I have no idea." A humble brain might have admitted, "Something strange just happened." But the human brain is not always humble when there is a story available. So it made one up. The patient explained that the shovel was needed to clean out the chicken shed. Wrong, but impressively tidy. The brain had been caught inventing a reason after the fact, not hesitantly, not with a warning label, confidently, like a man in a suit explaining a train delay he only discovered 5 seconds ago. Gazzaniga called this system the interpreter. Its job is to make life feel coherent. It takes actions, feelings, guesses, memories, and scraps of evidence, then stitches them into a story called me. Most of the time, this is useful. Without it, life would feel like someone dropped a filing cabinet down a staircase. But the interpreter has one serious flaw. It explains even when it does not know. It is the part of the mind that walks into the wreckage and says, "Yes, exactly as planned." This does not prove that free will is fake. That would be too simple, and science rarely hands us answers with a bow on top. But it does suggest that parts of the brain may begin shaping thoughts, choices, and feelings before the conscious story catches up. Then the storyteller arrives late, clears its throat, and gives a speech. This is a very human problem. We often think we know why we did something, why we clicked, why we snapped, why we bought the thing, why we ate the biscuit, especially the biscuit. But sometimes the explanation may be more like a press release than a source document. Plausible, well-formatted, not necessarily the truth. Now add one more layer. Even when we are not suppressing thoughts, judging thoughts, or explaining thoughts, our minds often wander away entirely. In 2010, Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert used an app to ping people during ordinary life. The app asked what they were doing, how they felt, and whether their mind was actually on the thing in front of them. They gathered roughly 250,000 reports from 2,250 adults. The result was startling. People's minds were wandering 46.9% of the time, nearly half. That means almost half of waking life, the body is in one place while the mind has gone elsewhere without leaving a note. You are brushing your teeth. Your mind is replaying an argument from 2018. You are driving to work. Your mind is rehearsing a future disaster that probably will not happen. You are sitting in a meeting. Your face says, "I understand the quarterly numbers." Your brain says, "Would a penguin enjoy a water slide?" This is not always bad. Mind wandering can help with planning, creativity, and problem solving. Some good ideas probably began while someone was meant to be paying attention to something much duller. But Killingsworth and Gilbert found that people tended to report being less happy when their minds had wandered away from the present moment. Which makes sense. When the mind is free to go anywhere, it rarely chooses a peaceful meadow. It often chooses an old regret, an imaginary conflict, or a future problem wearing a hat and carrying paperwork. So now we have a strange picture. You cannot fully control which thoughts appear. Trying to suppress a thought can make it stronger. Most people have intrusive thoughts. Your brain sometimes explains actions after the fact, and your attention wanders off nearly half the time. This is not the tidy command center we like to imagine. This is more like a committee meeting inside a haunted radio. Useful, yes. Brilliant, often. Orderly, absolutely not. So where do thoughts really come from? Science can answer part of that. Thoughts arise from activity across the brain. Memory, emotion, attention, perception, language, prediction, and bodily signals all mixed together. Your brain is constantly modeling the world, checking danger, replaying experience, imagining futures, and trying to keep you alive long enough to pay another electricity bill. A thought may begin as a memory, or a sensation, or an emotion, or a prediction, or a tiny association triggered by something you barely noticed. A smell, a word, a face, a song, a stomach feeling, a pattern your brain recognized before you did. By the time a thought appears in awareness, some of the work may already have happened behind the curtain. Consciousness often receives the finished product and acts as if it supervised the factory. It did not. It arrived for the ribbon cutting. That may be why thoughts feel so mysterious. We experience the arrival, not the entire manufacturing process. A thought pops into awareness and we say, "I thought of that." But often we did not watch it being built. It simply appeared at the door, sometimes carrying useful information, sometimes carrying nonsense, sometimes carrying a bear. This is where the question becomes older than psychology. Long before brain scans, laboratories, and white bear experiments, people were already asking where thoughts come from. Different traditions gave different answers. Buddhist traditions often describe thoughts as things that arise and pass away, like events in the mind rather than possessions to cling to. Hindu traditions have long spoken about observing the restless activity of the mind instead of identifying with every movement it makes. Christianity and Islam both distinguish between a passing thought and a deliberate action, recognizing that not every thought defines the person experiencing it. Those traditions do not all say the same thing, but they notice something similar. Thoughts often seem to arrive before we choose them. Modern science has not made that mystery disappear. It has given us better maps. It has shown us mechanisms. It has measured patterns. It has given us bells, apps, patience, experiments, and graphs. But the deepest part remains strangely slippery. Where exactly is a thought before you notice it? At what point does brain activity become experience? Why does this thought appear now and not another? Why does one memory rise quietly from the dark while 1,000 others stay hidden? There is no simple answer, which is inconvenient, but also magnificent, because it means that one of the most ordinary things you do all day is still one of the strangest. Thinking. It happens constantly, so constantly that we barely notice it. And yet the next thought is always a small arrival from somewhere just beyond the edge of awareness. In a few seconds, another thought will appear in your mind. You do not know what it will be. You do not know when it will arrive. And yet it is already on its way. That may be one of the strangest things about being human. If you enjoyed this strange little journey, subscribe and help us reach 1 million curious minds. There are many more weird facts hiding in plain sight, and we intend to bother all of them.